welcome back to another EDS and HSD Awareness Month video. I'm Chronically Jenni, and every year I try and bring you a series of videos so you can learn a little bit more about Ehlers Danlos Syndrome and Hypermobility Spectrum Disorder. Today we're talking about the things that we wish other people understood about what it's like to live with EDS and HSD. EDS and HSD come with so many different symptoms, can be so variable and so stressful and frustrating. And what makes it even harder sometimes is being able to explain everything that's going on in your body to someone else, especially when it can be so invisible. So today, my dazzle want to tell you the things you should know about what it's like to live with EDS and HSD.
I hope that if anything positive comes out of quarantining and COVID, it's that people have a better understanding and more compassion to those that are chronically ill, being home, getting things taken away. Those are all normal for us, and sometimes it's harder to see and understand until you actually experience it.
I guess the main thing I find myself wanting people to know about EDS is how multi-systemic it is. There is no one thing that it affects. Obviously it's connective tissue and therefore, the whole body is affected. A lot of the time I find myself describing it to people and they go, oh, like hypermobility. And the only way that I then get through to these people is by saying, yeah, it's like a severe form of hypermobility that affects the organs too and makes your organs all hypermobile and nothing works properly. And I think people don't realise that. Like even, I learn day by day that I have another symptom or another system is affected.
A lot of people with EDS, any of the subtypes, can look quite well. They look good on the outside, but it's obviously the insides and other issues which can cause them a lot of grief. So it's just really, don't jump to conclusions. And if someone looks okay, that they are, because they very well might not be.
The one thing that I really wish other people knew and understood about this condition is the uncertainty of it. And the only way that I can find to relate that to a normal person at the moment is the coronavirus pandemic. Right now, we're all living in the unknown, and that's scary. We're upset about the things we're missing, whether that's birthdays or weddings or holidays or work or education. We're all fighting this invisible enemy as best we can. But for those of us with EDS and other chronic illnesses, that's our lives every single day. We're just sitting and waiting for the next attack, not knowing how we're going to be and what symptoms are going to come up from one day to the next. For you healthy, normal people watching, this uncertainty will eventually end. But for us, it never will.
One thing I wish people knew about EDS is that the pain is very, very real. And even though you can't see it, I wish there was just more awareness about it, because
experience pain in all of my joints all of the time. The pain doesn't ever go away.
One thing you'd like people to know about what it's like to have Ehlers Danlos Syndrome is that we are always in pain and we are always exhausted, and even if we don't say we're tired or we don't say we're in pain, we are, and we're struggling every day. And it's hard because sometimes people don't believe you and they can't see your pain. So one thing I wish people knew is that we really are in pain, and that it's not going away anytime soon.
Another thing is that everything takes so much more energy than kind of like the normal or what I guess other people are used to, and so that everything just kind of takes that much more out of you, and then you have to kind of recover afterwards, or again just take time out to kind of get over the amount of energy that you've used.
Something I would like to say to people is that even though Ehlers Danlos Syndrome, it's an invisible illness, it's 100% real, and it can be really disabling sometimes, especially because of the pain. and that it's kind of hard to understand for some people. Like, for example, that one day you wake up and you're able to do everything you want, and next day you might not feel very well and you can't do those things anymore. So normal people can't really get that, or it's hard for them to understand that. For example, one day you're like full of energy, but next day maybe you're really tired and really moody because you've spent about a week without sleeping because your joints keep popping up while you're sleeping. So that is something that people really need to understand and be more empathic. We really need more empathy from people who don't have the syndrome.
One thing I would like you to know about what it's like for me to have EDS is I am never faking being sick, in pain or exhausted. But I am often faking being well because it's easier than dealing with all the sorry, unsolicited advice and misbeliefs.
One thing I would like everybody to know is that it really does feel like your skeleton's having a party inside your skin. It's so uncomfortable, and your bones just feel like they're just gonna pop out at any given time.
Something that I'd like other people to know about EDS and what it's like to live with is that we don't always look sick. Even though we might look okay, it doesn't mean that we aren't suffering underneath.
And one thing I would like people to know about EDS is how changeable it is. So you can have two people with exactly the same diagnosis but symptoms at the opposite end of the spectrum. The same way you can have one person who one day is relatively alright and then the next day or even the next hour they can't get out of bed. So that makes it really, really hard to make plans or commit to anything because you don't see it coming, even as we don't know what's around the corner.
I would like people to know that we are always pushing over our limits, and being there for us and understanding us is the best thing you can do.
I want people to know that EDS is not just skin and joints. It is your collagen, which is actually 30% of the human body.
I think I would want more people to understand, or at least learn that there are certain conditions that can impact multiple different parts of your body in so many different ways, and EDS is one of those conditions, and it's very different for every single person who has it.
Another thing I'd like people to know is that even within those that have EDS and the different types obviously impacts the symptoms they get, but everyone has different symptoms and severities. I think a lot of the time people compare or kind of think that it's going to go down a certain route because other people with EDS have that or have experienced that. But, you know, we're all different. We all have different symptoms and severities of that, and we all kind of cope with it all in different ways. So yeah, it's definitely not a kind of one size fits all at all.
It's not just about being bendy or flexible. So the consequences of having connective tissue that isn't normal is that it's also 24/7 severe chronic pain and chronic fatigue. People, when I go out in public, they always ask what's wrong with me when they see that I'm like a young woman using a cane and leg braces. And I can't go anywhere without people asking me incredibly personal and invasive medical questions, and most of these people I've never met before.
One thing I'd like people to know is just because I am only talking about one symptom doesn't mean that there are not more.
It really sucks having it. EDS is an invisible disease, so no one can really guess that I have it just by looking at me, and that has advantages and disadvantages. Not having priority in public transport or in the shopping queue, it ends up being torture. So many times I ended up sitting on the floor because I couldn't take it anymore. And another thing that people do not imagine is the effort and adaptations that I have to make in most of what I do, like taking care of my home, working, walking, traveling. I am either smart and adapt, or I will suffer the consequences hours later. An exaggeration can make me stay in bed or even prevent me to hit by myself the next day. And makeup is my best friend so many times. It can disguise a lot of things. Pain, fatigue, fever, but that doesn't mean those doesn't exist.
And an invisible disability. I will not get better, but I will have my good days when my symptoms are more controlled. Even then, I am limited to what I can do and what is safe for me and my body.
It's so different from person to person, in that we're not just cut into a mold. A lot of us don't have feeding tubes. I don't have any tubes. I don't use canes or wheelchairs or anything. I look perfectly normal, and then there's days where I can't get out of my bed. It's very different depending on the person, and that just because we don't look a certain way doesn't mean that reflects what we're actually feeling.
One of the things I'd like people to know about having EDS is that we're going to have to cancel some days. We're going to have to cancel plans, not go to work, not even go to the store or leave bed for that matter. And it's not because we're lazy or that we don't want to, it's because we're dealing with pain, or we're dealing with fatigue, or a flare-up of symptoms. And yeah, it's going to be annoying for you, but think about the fact that we have to live in this. We have to deal with this every day. This isn't something that we can hide from.
1 minute I could be okay, I'm doing really good, I'm doing great. And then the next minute I could be being admitted to the hospital. There is so much unpredictability, and it's just 1 minute you could be okay and the next minute you're just not. And that's just the nature of the condition. And I wish more people could understand that.
I wish people were more understanding of the fact that it really does make a difference what we are surrounded by, whether that be medical care, people, support from the government, whatever that looks like. If we're given the right things, we can thrive just as much as everybody else can. It doesn't need to be a life sentence of misery. People can live perfectly happy lives with a chronic condition if they are given the scenario to thrive, whatever that looks like. And actually, hopefully, everybody being stuck in quarantine will make people realize that there are ways of integrating, not everybody will be capable of working, but there are ways of integrating people who want to work that can't work in a work environment. We're doing everything via Zoom and things these days, so surely that should show people that we can integrate people with chronic illnesses if they are able to do so, and that shouldn't stop them from thriving if that's what they want to do.
Thank you so much for watching and for listening and for taking some of that on board. There's so much we wish we could share about living with EDS and HSD, but sometimes it's just so difficult to communicate, especially when there's all these crazy symptoms going on. So I hope that helped you understand just a little bit more of what it's like to live with EDS and HSD. If you've liked this video and found it useful, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, I'd love it if you'd hit subscribe, and I will see you next week for another EDS Awareness Month video.